You know, sometimes truth has a way of finding its way through the thickest walls. It doesn't matter where you come from, what you've been taught, or how much pride you carry. When truth knocks at the door of your soul, you either open up or you keep living a lie. And this is exactly what we're talking about here. An Israeli scholar, someone raised in a world shaped by politics, history, and deep-rooted beliefs, stood up and said something that shook the ground. He looked beyond the narratives he grew up with, beyond the textbooks, beyond the arguments on the news, and he said it plain and clear. Islam is the only true religion. Now that, my friend, takes courage. That takes heart. That takes a soul that refuses to be blind anymore. This wasn't some lightweight statement made to get attention. This wasn't some headline-grabbing act. No, this was a realization born out of research, out of reflection, out of long nights questioning everything he thought he knew. Imagine living your whole life, thinking you're standing on solid ground, only to find out the truth was in another place all along. Imagine digging into the Qur'an, comparing it with history, theology, philosophy, and realizing it was all lining up perfectly, while everything else had cracks and contradictions. It wasn't emotion. It wasn't peer pressure. It was fact after fact hitting harder than any storm. He saw that Islam didn't come to destroy but to complete, to fulfill. It didn't erase the legacy of the prophets before. It honored them. It didn't twist the message. It preserved. From Adam to Noah to Abraham, Moses, Jesus, and finally Muhammad. Peace be upon them all. Islam wasn't building a new tower. It was restoring the one humanity kept breaking down over and over again. This Israeli scholar could no longer deny it. He saw how Islam remained untouched, unedited, pure in its essence, while everything else had been altered by time, kings, councils, and corrupt hands. And when you see something stay true for over 14 centuries untouched, while the world around it changes 1,000 times, that's not chance. That's not accident. That's divine protection. He realized Islam wasn't just for Arabs. It wasn't just for a tribe. It wasn't exclusive to a bloodline. It was a call to every soul walking this earth. Black, white, brown, rich, poor, it didn't matter. Islam reached out to the janitor and the king with the same words, the same dignity. And this Israeli scholar, he didn't just read about Islam from a distance. No, he stepped close. He learned the prayer, felt the weight of the Qur'an's words, and witnessed how Islam doesn't just touch your mind, it transforms your heart. He saw people broken by life's cruelty stand strong again with Islam. He saw addicts break free. He saw hatred melt into compassion. He saw people who once lived for themselves now living for God. And when a man like that, who had every reason to cling to his past, chooses to stand up and say Islam is the only true religion, you better believe it's not by accident. You better believe it's not a trick or some emotional whim. It's truth breaking through generations of noise. And if you listen carefully, you'll hear it too. The sound of a heart finally finding its home. Truth, my friend, will always stand when everything else falls. The thing about facts, real hard facts, is that they don't care about your feelings. They don't bend to fit your story. They don't adjust to make you comfortable. Facts stand tall whether you want to face them or not. And that's what happened when this Israeli scholar dug into the roots of Islam. It wasn't about opinions anymore. It wasn't about what I feel or what I heard. It was about hard, undeniable historical facts that lined up like stars pointing to one truth. You see, when you look at Islam through the lens of history, through the cold, unchanging records of time, you realize something powerful. Islam is exactly what it claims to be. It's not a new invention. It's not a copy. It's the original message. The same truth every prophet preached, preserved and protected without a single crack. The scholar looked at how Islam emerged in a world soaked in idolatry, division, and injustice. And yet within the lifetime of one man, Muhammad, peace be upon him, it wiped all that out and replaced it with unity, mercy, and a civilization that honored knowledge, justice, and equality. That doesn't happen by accident. That doesn't happen because someone gave a good speech. It happens because the hand of God is guiding it. When he studied the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he didn't see a man hungry for power. He saw a man who lived humbly, slept on the floor, gave everything he had away, forgave even his enemies when he had the upper hand, and cried for the people who rejected him. He saw a man whose every step matched the message he brought. Now you tell me, where else do you find that kind of purity in leadership? He looked at the Qur'an too, and not just in translation. He dug into its language, its structure, its preservation. 14 centuries, my friend, and not a single word changed, not one. Scholars tried to challenge it, kings tried to bury it, enemies tried to twist it, but here it stands, unchanged, memorized by millions in every corner of the earth. The scholar realized that no other religious text could claim that. Not the Torah, not the Bible, not anything else. And when something stays pure for that long, untouched by the fingers of history, that's not just impressive. That's a sign. He couldn't ignore how Islamic civilization rose from the deserts, bringing science, medicine, philosophy, architecture, art, all blossoming under the same belief in one God. It wasn't just spiritual. It was practical, it was transformational. Muslims didn't just pray and preach, they built, they healed, they taught. They preserved knowledge when the rest of the world was burning books. And every step of that journey was tied back to Islam, tied back to the command of seeking knowledge, of honoring truth wherever it is found. That kind of consistency, that kind of impact isn't a coincidence. The deeper he went, the more the facts lined up. The prophecies in the Quran being fulfilled, the preservation of the Arabic language, the perfect balance between mercy and justice in Islamic law, all of it pointed back to one thing. Islam wasn't a product of its time. It wasn't a social movement. It wasn't a myth wrapped in poetry. It was truth dropped down from the heavens, steady and pure, untouched by the corruption that swallowed so many other paths. And you know what? When the facts are laid out clear and you still turn away, that's not ignorance anymore. That's arrogance. This Israeli scholar didn't make that mistake. He saw the facts, he weighed them, and he chose truth over pride. Because in the end, facts don't bow to anyone, and neither does truth. You know, in a world where everything changes, where nothing stays the same for long, there's something almost shocking about finding something that stayed exactly the way it was meant to be. That's what this Israeli scholar realized when he stepped deeper into the study of Islam. He wasn't just looking at beliefs or rituals. He was looking at the very foundation, the text, the practice, the way Islam lived and breathed through the hearts of people. And what he found, it stunned him. While everything else in history bent, twisted, got edited, or got lost, Islam stood strong, unchanged, and unmatched in its consistency and preservation. Think about it. Every major religious tradition in the world has seen changes, new versions, councils deciding what stays and what goes, edits made to fit new ideas or political needs. But when he looked at Islam, he saw something different. He saw a religion that protected its original message like a treasure. The Quran was not just a book sitting on a shelf gathering dust. No, it was alive. It was memorized, recited, passed from heart to heart across generations. Millions of people today, young and old, Arab and non-Arab, rich and poor, know the Quran by heart. Word for word, letter for letter. You can't find that anywhere else. You just can't. And you know why? Because Allah promised to protect his final message, and history shows that promise was kept. The scholar dug even deeper. He studied how even the sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, the hadiths, were preserved with meticulous care. Scholars traveled across deserts and mountains, recording the chain of narrators, verifying every link, rejecting anything even slightly doubtful. They built a science so detailed that you would think it was made for rocket engineering, not religion. But that's how serious they were about truth. And when you see that level of commitment, that level of respect for the integrity of the message, you realize this wasn't ordinary. This wasn't human effort alone. This was something else, something divinely guided. He compared this to other scriptures. And the contrast hit him hard. Ancient texts missing whole parts, different versions fighting for legitimacy, human hands rewriting what was supposed to be sacred. Council meetings where powerful men voted on what to include and what to leave out. It wasn't hard to see the difference anymore. Islam didn't play those games. It didn't need revisions. It didn't need updates to keep up with the times. It was complete from day one, and it remains complete today. And it wasn't just about the text. It was about the way Muslims live their faith. Whether you walk into a mosque in Nigeria, Indonesia, Egypt, or America, you find the same prayer, the same Qur'an, the same fasting in Ramadan, the same love for the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. No matter the culture, no matter the background, the core remains untouched. That kind of unity, that kind of consistency, is not man-made. It's divine. This scholar, after years of study, knew he couldn't explain it away. It wasn't a fluke, it wasn't a lucky accident. It was the fulfillment of a divine promise made over 1400 years ago. Islam stood preserved in a way nothing else did, and it still offers that pure, unfiltered connection to God today. In a world full of edits, versions, and rewrites, Islam remains the pure voice calling humanity back to its creator, and that's something no hand can forge and no force can break. When you really open your eyes to what Islam is, you start to realize it's not locked up inside any one culture, it's not trapped inside any one people, and it sure isn't chained to any one corner of the world. That's the beauty this Israeli scholar saw when he dug deep into the heart of Islam. It wasn't a religion for a tribe. It wasn't something you inherited by blood or lost because of where you were born. No, Islam came down like rain, meant for every single patch of earth it could touch, every thirsty soul that needed saving. And when you think about that, when you really feel the weight of it, you understand why Islam has stood the test of time, and why it continues to call out to people from every background, every race, every language. He saw how Islam spoke to the human being, not to the color of your skin, not to the language of your tongue, not to the money in your pocket. It spoke to your soul. It didn't ask what flag you carried. It didn't care about your last name. It asked one question: who created you, and are you ready to live for him? That's it. Simple, pure, and it's powerful because it cuts through all the barriers human beings like to build between each other. It tears down the walls of racism, nationalism, and pride, and it lays you bare before the one who made you. When the scholar studied how Islam spread across the world, he found something incredible. Islam didn't grow because of swords, like the tired old stories try to say. It grew because it spoke to the heart. Merchants in Africa, sailors in Southeast Asia, scholars traveling through Europe. They carried the message not by force, but by example. People saw how Muslims lived, how they prayed, how they honored justice, how they protected the weak, and they wanted that light for themselves. That's how Islam spread, heart to heart, soul to soul. And when you look at the numbers today, you see the proof. Islam isn't just thriving in so-called Muslim lands. It's the fastest growing religion in places where Muslims are a minority. That's not politics. That's not power. That's truth doing what truth does best, reaching who it's meant to reach. The scholar also recognized something else. Islam respects every nation, every people. It tells you to honor your parents no matter where you're from. It tells you to stand up for justice, even if it's against yourself or your own family. It tells you that the best among you are not the richest, not the strongest, not the ones with the most famous name. The best among you are the ones who have the most God consciousness, the ones whose hearts are closest to their Creator. Now tell me, what philosophy, what ideology, what so-called advanced system of thinking today really preaches that at its core? Only Islam. And here's the real kicker. The scholar realized that even if you erased every Muslim from the face of the earth, may God forbid, the Qur'an would still live on in the hearts of those who memorized it. The call to prayer would still echo across mountains and deserts. The message would survive, because it was never built on nationalism or conquest. It was built on universal truth that belongs to every human being. Islam didn't come to build walls, it came to break them down and call every soul back to its creator, back to the one who created night and day, black and white, rich and poor, king and slave. When you see Islam not as a culture, not as a foreign thing, but as a universal truth calling all of us home, you realize this message was never meant to stay boxed in. And the heart that's searching for real truth will always recognize its sound when it calls. You know, it's one thing to read about a religion, to study it like you're checking facts off a list. But it's a whole different story when you watch how it transforms a person's soul. That's what this Israeli scholar witnessed when he looked at Islam. He didn't just see a set of rituals or laws on paper. He saw lives changed. He saw broken people get healed. He saw lost people find direction. He saw hearts once hardened by hate soften into compassion, into peace. Islam wasn't just information, it was transformation. It wasn't just belief, it was rebirth. The scholar started to realize something deep, something a lot of people miss. Islam isn't just about what you believe in your head, it's about what you live through your heart. It's about surrendering to something bigger than yourself. It's about letting go of your ego, your pride, your anger, your fears, and replacing it with trust, with patience, with love for your Creator, and mercy for His creation. He saw it in people who once chased power and fame, now chasing prayer and charity. He saw it in people who used to drown their sorrows in addiction, now standing sober, heads bowed to the ground, finding real peace for the first time in their lives. He looked at how Islam took people who had every reason to hate and turned them into protectors of peace. He saw former enemies standing shoulder to shoulder in prayer, no longer divided by race, by politics, by history. That kind of change doesn't come from speeches. It doesn't come from laws. It doesn't come from pressure. It comes from within, from a light that only God can turn on inside a human heart. And when you see that kind of real transformation, you know you're looking at something true, something bigger than anything the world can offer. The scholar also noticed how Islam doesn't just touch one part of your life. It touches every part. It's a way of living, a way of thinking, a way of being. It teaches you how to pray, yes, but it also teaches you how to speak kindly, how to treat your neighbor, how to do business with honesty, how to handle anger, how to love your spouse, how to raise your children. It doesn't leave any corner of your life in the dark. It brings light to all of it. And when you live under that light, you become a different person, not because you're forced to, but because you're free to. He saw that freedom, that peace, in the eyes of Muslims who had truly surrendered. They weren't perfect, nobody is. It's something that no amount of money, fame, or success can buy. And maybe most powerful of all, he saw that Islam didn't make people arrogant, it made them humble. Real Islam makes you walk softly on the earth, knowing that every breath you take is a gift. Real Islam teaches you to serve, to give, to forgive, to hope, to love. It doesn't make you better than others. It makes you better than who you used to be. And when this scholar saw that transformation happening again and again, across nations, across races, across generations, he knew in his heart he was standing in the presence of a truth that changes the world, one soul at a time. Because when real Islam enters the heart, it doesn't just change the way you pray. It changes the way you live, the way you love, and the way you leave your mark on this world. You know, sometimes life will put you on a road you never thought you'd walk. You'll find yourself standing at a crossroads, looking at everything you used to believe and realizing deep down, something doesn't add up. That's exactly what happened to this Israeli scholar. It wasn't planned. It wasn't something he set out to do. But when he went searching for truth, when he stripped away the noise, the politics, the pride, what he found wasn't what he expected. It was something greater, something humbling, something that shook him to his core. He found Islam, and he found himself waking up to a truth so beautiful and overwhelming that it demanded a change of heart. He had lived his whole life thinking he knew where he stood. raised with certain ideas, certain views, certain loyalties. But the more he studied, the more he realized that truth doesn't play favorites. Truth doesn't care about your background. It doesn't care about your comfort zone. Truth stands on its own, and you either recognize it or you turn away. And when the evidence piled up, when the facts became too heavy to ignore, he felt something inside him shift. It wasn't just intellectual, it was spiritual. It was something deeper than books and lectures. It was a pull on his soul. He started to see the world differently. He started to see himself differently. He realized that for all his life he had been chasing something, meaning, purpose, real connection with his Creator. And now, standing in front of Islam, he found what he had been missing. He found a religion that didn't just ask for belief. It asked for transformation. It asked for sincerity. It asked for humility. And more than anything, it asked him to submit. Not to men, not to governments, but to God alone. And that submission, that surrender, didn't feel like a defeat. It felt like freedom. It felt like walking out of a dark room into the sunlight. It felt like dropping a heavy load he didn't even know he was carrying. Because Islam wasn't calling him to lose himself. It was calling him to find his true self, the self God had created him to be. It didn't erase his identity. It completed it. It didn't take away his dignity. It restored it. The scholar also realized that coming to Islam wasn't about betraying his past. It wasn't about hating where he came from. It was about honoring the search for truth that had always been inside him. Islam honored all the prophets he had been taught about growing up. Moses, Abraham, Jesus, peace be upon them all. But it gave him the full picture, the final piece of the puzzle. And once he saw it, he couldn't unsee it. Once he tasted that truth, he couldn't pretend it wasn't real. It wasn't an easy road. He knew the cost. He knew the backlash he might face. But when a man's soul has seen the light, he can't go back to the darkness and pretend he's blind. He knew that no matter what came, standing with the truth was better than living comfortably in a lie. And that's the thing about awakening. It's not about making life easier. It's about making life real. It's about standing tall, heart wide open, ready to live for something bigger than yourself. And when this scholar took that step, when he embraced Islam not just with his mind but with his heart, he found a peace he had never known before. A peace the world couldn't give and the world couldn't take away. Because when the heart finally finds its true home with its Creator, no storm in this world can ever shake it again.